Here's a simple question. Who is the customer? You ask, what do you mean, who's the customer? I know who the customer is. Wait a minute, let's just unpack this for a second. When you talk about who's the customer, we're talking about who buys the product. Let me give you an example. Let's say your company buys Salesforce. So who's the customer when a company buys Salesforce? If the person who pays for the product is the customer, then it's not necessarily the person who uses it. So let's take a look at that. In Salesforce, the person who made the decision to go with Salesforce instead of another product could be the customer. The person who recommended Salesforce to the boss, maybe they're the customer. The boss who got the budgetary approval, are they the customer? Or is the technical team who decided to sign off on buying the product the customer? Or is it the finance head who actually approved the budget who has the check? The technical team leader who had to integrate that product into the company's technical stack, are they the customer? Or is it actually the user, the salesperson who actually uses the product day to day? Why is that important? Because you're going to focus the product, its features, its capabilities, all around how an individual who makes the decision to buy the product thinks. If you think it's the user and it turns out it's a financial person or a technical person, you're not going to appeal to that buyer in the same way. Why should you know this? If you had only built and sold your product to cater to one element of the customers I just mentioned, or other elements get in your way, your business could be in trouble. Let me illustrate this with a story. One of my portfolio companies, called Campus CE, sells a course registration software package for colleges and universities. The company did a preliminary customer survey of the interest and the need for this product. The registration departments at colleges came back and said, oh, gotta have this, want this, need this, this is important. Things were looking pretty exciting. So the company built the product, tested it with that potential user to make sure that it worked the way they wanted it to work. They went out and raised funds to go to market. They calculated a reasonable sales cycle and cost of sale and made projections based on their initial customer discovery process. Most every college, junior college and university wanted this product. The company brought in enough capital to get to market and reach break even based on their projections and what they heard from their customers. All makes sense, right? But then they actually went out to the market and began to sell their product. Turns out there were a few gatekeepers they didn't take into account. The problem was in getting an order through the college system. Education can be tough. For a college to buy a system, they first had to get budget approval and budget buy-off. Turns out that they only do a budget approval cycle maybe once every 6 months, maybe once a year. And if the company was lucky, they got into the right cycle. Once the budget was approved, there were 3 more months to wait since the department needed to go through an open RFP process. After the RFP process was run, the company received approval. Ha-ha, ready to go. They called to schedule the installation. The administrator gave them the number of the IT department who had to build the mechanisms to schedule the installation. The guy running the IT department said, hey, to integrate another system like this is at least 6 more months. Plus, the system had to be integrated with their learning management system at that time provided by a company called PeopleSoft. And so it went. 19 months later, the system was installed and the customer loved it. But the company was out of money on the first installation. Even though they had 35 colleges lined up and going through the process to buy the system, they didn't recognize who the customer was, and they built their entire business plan and funding plan based on the wrong customer. Campus CE found out the hard way that you need to know all the aspects of your customer and be ready to address them all, plan for it, and build a solid forecast based on what you discover.